with Madelyne Pryor, the Goblin Queen, set to face off with a variant of herself from Earth 91-240, who also just so happens to be working for Orcus. Will Madelyne Pryor unleash the evil within, or will she become the hero that the Dark X-Men just might need? What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, I'm going to be talking about Dark X-Men number 5, written by Steve Fox, with art by Jonas Scharf, and color by Frank Martin. So this issue is the final battle between both versions of Madelyne Pryor, our Maddy from Earth 616 and the Goblin Queen of Earth 91-240. Two characters who couldn't be more diametrically opposed in terms of what power they possess, while Madelyne Pryor has leaned a bit more into her mutant side, possessing the same powers as the Omega level Jean Grey. She has also dabbled in the realm of magic. She's no novice, she's actually quite skilled, but she's nowhere near on the level of the Goblin Queen of Earth 91-240, because that version of Madelyne Pryor allowed her mutant power to be cut off. Now, granted, this is all stuff that happened recently over the past couple of issues of Dark X-Men, but this version of Madelyne Pryor has spent so much time in limbo and studying the dark arts that whereas Madeline is skilled in the way of the mystic arts, this version of Madelyne Pryor, the Goblin Queen, she is infinitely more powerful than Madelyne Pryor could ever hope to be in regards to wielding magic. She doesn't need mutant power. Every depraved and wicked thing we have seen her do since the previous issue, when she literally ran roughshod over an entire embassy full of mutants, that wasn't mutant power, that was strictly just magic. The reason why we discover that this version of Madelyne Pryor wants the Mercy Crown that our Maddy had created and we saw shown off in previous issues of Dark X-Men is probably for the same reason that Orcus wants this very same thing. They want this because, well, for one, it works no differently than Cerebro. It would easily help them track down other mutants. But one thing that I never really thought about in this regard is that the Goblin Queen reveals what this Mercy Crown is actually for, or at least what it can potentially do. While yes, for Madelyne Pryor, it would allow her to locate and find mutants in order to help them in their hour of need in the wake of everything that happened at this year's Hellfire Gala. The truth is, and the Goblin Queen points this out, it can also be used to kill every mutant on Earth. Something that would be very handy should mutant kind, more specifically the X-Men, ever turn their back on her again. Now, this is something that Maddy tries to, push down or try to deny. However, it doesn't make it any less true. The whole rub here is that the Goblin Queen of Earth 91-240 doesn't want to fight Madelyne Pryor. She doesn't have any beef with her. She actually wants to work with her. She actually wants to help this version of Maddy reach her true potential, help her unlock those magic skills that she has been lacking in. And not only that, but also wants to use the Mercy Crown in conjunction with Limbo to find every other version of Madelyne Pryor across the multiverse and create a Council of Maddies. This is something that it would be a silly overusage of the whole council of this, council of that, because we've seen this a lot. We've seen this with, the Council of Reeds, the Council of Kangs. We've also seen this with the Council of Mephistos, the Red Council, whatever you want to call it. This would just be more of the same. And while it would be cool to see, it's one of those things I'm kind of glad is not going to happen, because Maddy does in fact turn against the Goblin Queen. However, not before hearing her out. And this is something I actually talked about in my previous video for X-Men Red number 18, the finale of that series. And in that, I talked about how the Annihilation Staff, which kind of has some similar coaxing abilities as the Goblin Queen of Earth 91-240, this situation is a little bit different, because where Storm was actually listening to what the Annihilation Staff had to say, and it's trying to coax her into taking up its staff and wielding it as a weapon against Genesis, in that case, Storm was listening, but didn't actually go with what Annihilation was selling. However, in this case, Maddy is listening, and at first when I read this, I thought to myself, oh, she's listening. She's not really going to go with any of this. She's just using this as an opportunity to lower the guard of her variant and then kill her. That's not the case. Madeline kind of implies she was actually listening to what this version of herself had to say, that she was actually considering taking her hand, working with her, creating that council of Maddies, so to speak. And while I appreciate the character Faint being able to stop Maddy from going along with it, transforming herself into the old Madelyne Pryor that Scott Summers fell in love with after the fallout of the Dark Phoenix saga, yeah, that was cute and I liked it. That said, I don't really care for the feeling it leaves that Maddy was so easily swayed to just give up on her rehabilitation, because it's pretty much implied that if Faint would not have done this, the Dark X-Men would have been screwed, Earth would have been screwed. And maybe I feel this way because I've been following this journey literally since it started in Hellions #1. That was kind of the kick-off for Madelyne Pryor in the beginning of her journey towards redemption. A journey that began, roughly around in like 2020, 2021, and has spread throughout Hellions, leading all the way up to New Mutants, and then the Dark Web crossover event, and then the Jean Grey. There was an issue of Jean Grey where it kind of bled into that. And then you also have this here, Dark X-Men, and that's roughly 3 or so years worth of storytelling, and I get it, but it did feel like, man, it kind of cheapened all of that rehabilitation we had seen of her. You could also make the argument that Dark Web kind of cheats you out of the rehabilitation she had with New Mutants, and I could easily make the argument myself. No one has to make it for me. I can make it myself that, yes, there's very likely an allegory here for addiction, because that's kind of the thing that Maddy is dealing with here. Not so much in the same way as like alcoholism or, drug addiction or whatever, but it's a situation here where I feel that this is kind of an allegory for that she struggles with whether she should be good or bad, and whether she should be the person everyone believes she is, or be the person she knows she can be. That is her struggle, and it very much is in the same vein as people who struggle with addiction. It's a constant battle. It never goes away. It's not a war you ever really truly win forever. You're always, if you are someone who has dealt with addiction, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But for those who never have or have never lived with anyone who has struggled with this sort of thing, yeah, it's something that you never stop dealing with. It is always going on in the back of your head, even if you feel you have a full handle on it. You really don't. And it's not to belittle, anyone's, belief in themselves, but it's just something that's a reality, that if you allow yourself to fall back, it is very easy, especially if you have a hyper addictive personality, or fixations, it's very easy to lose all of that just in the blink of an eye. I've literally watched it happen. That said, it's dangerous to go alone. Take these. So what's next for Maddy now that all this is done and dusted? Honestly, don't really know, but I will say it is interesting to think that she will be a force for good going forward. I would want that. I think that's what she deserves as a character. Even if her brand of good is a little bad, a little teensy-weensy bit bad. And if the final panel is anything to go by, one might even be able to make the case for her doing as much bad as she does good, or maybe even more bad than good. But I do feel like she is embracing who she truly is, and for better or worse, I think that's honestly probably the best thing she could do. However, I would, just me personally, I feel like she does deserve that opportunity to no longer just be a bad guy. And I will say this, if for whatever reason anyone at the X office, at Marvel, whoever, if they decide to take her back down a path of villainy, I hope that it is a path of villainy that is one she chooses for herself, but I hope it's a path that she walks on her own for good reason, and not because someone manipulated her in the ways that characters like Mr. Sinister did in the past. That said, going back to Faint, it is nice to see her being welcomed onto the X-Men team in the loosest sense of terms. I mean, technically she is, but it's not something that happens in the core X-Men title, so that can always be interpreted however you want to choose to interpret it. But considering that the X-Men are kind of lean right now, I think it's safe to say she's probably a new active member of the roster now. Also, it seems like Gambit is rejoining the team, or will be rejoining the team. He's back with Rogue in the Morlock tunnels. And granted, while Rogue is kind of off doing her own thing on the Uncanny Avenger side of things, that series will also be wrapping up very soon. So everything's kind of coming full circle just in time for the rise of the Powers of 10 and the fall of the House of X or whatever. We also see at a later point that the character Maggot, who had pretty much exited the team like 2 issues ago, Maggot is seemingly living amongst the Morlocks out on the ocean with Callisto, what's left of the Morlocks for that matter, and he seems quite happy, so I'm happy for him. I love Maggot as a character and always felt he always got the short end of the stick, so yeah. I'll take this. This is honestly kind of a win for him. And with Azazel dead and no longer the father of Nightcrawler for that matter, as God intended, Emplate is out of his deal with him thanks to the Banff Dragon having ripped Azazel apart. And presumably, Azazel is dead for the time being, though I imagine he will be back. But with Emplate now freed from his contract with Azazel, he is now free to go do whatever he wants. And the first thing he does is abandon the Dark X-Men. So it basically just kind of lends more credence to the fact that he was never in this to be good. He was literally only doing this because Azazel made him. He's gone and he's back to preying on the innocent. So good for him. You know, sometimes villains have to stay villains, and honestly, Emplate's one of those types of characters. I'm okay with him staying a villain. I'm honestly not even bothered by this. The Banff Dragon that I mentioned earlier that killed Azazel, the very same Banff Dragon that the Goblin Queen brought from Earth 91-240, that same Banff Dragon is now the house pet of the Limbo Embassy and seems quite happy and is being the best boy humanly possible. We also see that Flourish is still out there leading her displaced mutants. No change there. It's heavily implied that, you know, she's going to continue doing her thing and we might see her somewhere down the road. We might not, but I do feel like it'd be a missed opportunity to not revisit this character at some point down the road. And we also know that the Wolverine cybernetic clone Albert is reunited with LCD in this issue when Zero kind of merges them all together with himself. But ultimately, they end up just cutting themselves apart from Zero and are running off on their own. And I'm sure we'll see them again at some point. And we don't have to worry about Agent Valens anymore. They're dead. She was literally teleported into a wall by Azazel shortly before he met his own demise at the hands of the Banff Dragon. And Agent Krull is also dead, having been killed by the amalgamation of Zero, Albert, and LCD. So those Orcus agents are completely off the board, which is kind of sad to see just because, you know, there was so much setup for them and they're just gone, you know, just like that. But knowing how things work with characters like Agent Valens, who has, you know, made a deal with the, you know, a devil, not the devil, but a lower level demon of some sort, as Azazel points out, it's safe to say she could potentially come back at some point. But I feel like, honestly, the ship kind of sailed on those two. That said, I don't want anyone to think that I'm sympathetic for them. I mean, they are total fascist and work for fascist, and if that is the case, I'm not pressing F in the chat for them under any circumstances whatsoever. And honestly, I don't suggest you do either, but hey, if you do, that's on you, not on me. Whatever, you do you. All that aside, I feel like Dark X-Men wrapped up pretty nice and neat. Of all the series that kind of spun out of the Hellfire Gala, I gotta say, this one was probably one of the bigger surprises. I wasn't quite sure what I would think of this, and it actually makes me more excited for what's coming up with Steve Fox's Dead X-Men, which is going to be right around the corner. And while I know I haven't talked about Havoc in any of this, it did kind of seem like what Steve Fox was setting up here with Havoc was probably how it was going to lead into Dead X-Men. Just having seen some of the solicits for Dead X-Men, I'm now starting to think maybe that's not the case. And who knows, maybe it is. That said, I still enjoyed the series. It was great. It did a lot of what it needed to do. I know Angel kind of got the short end of the stick at the very end of this. We actually do see, and I think I probably showed this earlier, Angel's skull is seen at the very bottom of the ocean, and it doesn't seem like there's really much else for that there. It's just, it's done. He's done, and maybe they're setting it up for him to come back at a later date, but yeah, he's basically, he's out. He's done. That's it for him. Too bad, so sad. But yeah, beyond that, I think the series as a whole did a very, very good job. So yeah, I want to see more from Steve Fox. I'm now becoming more of a fan. I really wasn't as familiar with Steve Fox writing before this. So yeah, I think this is Nothing but a good thing. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video and you want to keep up with more of my coverage of comics like X-Men, as well as other comics from Marvel and DC, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell so that way you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. You could have clicked on literally anything on this platform and you chose to click on me, so I appreciate it. Until next time, let me know what you thought about Dark X-Men #5 and the series as a whole. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.